Welcome to our Rise Up Summer School launch, Cultivating Care, Growing Movements, Washington Food Chain Workers Struggle for Food Sovereignty. We're so excited to have you all here. If you're in the Seattle area, I hope you're able to stay cool and stay kind of comfy right now. My name is Erica. I'm one of the food justice co-chairs and one of the summer school coordinators. And we've been working really hard to put this together for you all. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that we are all on Indigenous land in some way. So even though we're not in the same place, we're all on Indigenous land. And if you don't know what Indigenous land you're on, I encourage you to look that up on nativelands.ca. I am in Seattle, so I am on unceded Coast Salish land, the traditional land of the Duwamish Muckleshoot peoples. And if you occupy the land of the Duwamish, a tribe that has long struggled for federal recognition, you can also acknowledge that you're a visitor on this land by paying rent to real rent Duwamish. So I can put that in the chat if you wanna look at that website and put in your contribution. So before we begin, I want to talk to you about who we are, who is Community Alliance for Global Justice, and what is our summer school. So some of the folks that have been here were here for the hour beforehand, learning about food sovereignty and food justice and Community Alliance for Global Justice. But we have some other folks here, some panelists, and some people who are just here for the panel. So I'm going to talk a little bit about CAGJ. Our mission is to organize and to strengthen the global food sovereignty movement. And we do movement building that requires two strategies. The first is raising consciousness to shift the narrative around the food system and also develop our collective leadership in order to build power necessary to engage in making systematic change. The goal of summer school is to fulfill both of those objectives. And about summer school, it is a 3-month political education and leadership development program. And it's a space to collectively develop tools and analysis to strengthen the global food sovereignty movement. It's also completely free, which I love. This year's summer school theme is Cultivating Care and Growing Movements. And this is where we're going to be digging into movement building, creating more space for joy. So I know we've been on Zoom a lot this year, on the computer a lot, but we're hoping to make a space that feels really fulfilling and engaging over Zoom and really nourishing. And we're looking to answer questions such as how we build grassroots power, what does it mean to be part of a social movement, how do we organize ourselves in a way that sustains us and nourishes us, and how do we build solidarity with struggles for justice. And we're situating these conversations in the food system and in the work of our partners whom we've had cultivated solidarity. And so why are we meeting tonight? So this is kind of our welcome to our summer school, and we're starting it off with a panel with some really great panelists, which will be introduced later on. But we're meeting tonight to build off our theme of cultivating care and growing movements. And we're going to be hearing about our solidarity partners' current struggles for food sovereignty, how they are building joy, care, and culture into the fabric of the change work they're doing, and how their organizing has benefited from building relationships across the food chain. So this event aims to contribute to our collective vision of stronger ties among Washington State food workers. So we're so excited to have you here and engage more in this topic. So I'm going to pass it over to Connor to talk about this and introduce our panelists and facilitate this discussion. So on to you, Connor.
Thanks, Erica. Hi, everyone. I'm Connor, a member of the Summer School Organizing Collective. We are so fortunate to have amazing representatives from some of CAGJ's partner organizations, and they will share some of their insights and experiences within the food sovereignty movement. In the order they will speak, the organizations here tonight are Ged Green, Familias Unidas por la Justicia, Uprooted and Rising, UFCW, and Community to Community. Our first prompt for the panelists is, tell us a bit about who you are and what your organization does. What efforts or struggles for food sovereignty are you engaged in currently? Can you share some specific examples of your work that may be emerging now? For the panelists, take up to 4-ish minutes to answer this question, and I will give you a reminder when your time is up. And Jill, could you please start us off?
Sure. Do you hear me okay? Good. Hi, everyone. Jill Mongiliman. I'm the executive director at Ged Green. We're an environmental justice organization based here in South Seattle. We organize people of color around the green movement. And for us, the green movement includes, access to healthy foods, green, living wage green jobs, transit, and healthy housing. It's actually really timely right now because we're in the middle of a very extreme heat wave in the Northwest. This is definitely a part of the climate change crisis, which we know is not it's not magic or that we have the climate change, but rather it is a corporate made a symptom of the type of exploitive extractive economy that we have. For us, for myself personally, I grew up here, born and raised in Seattle. My family's from the Philippines, which we migrated here. Our family migrated here because of the fascist Marcos dictatorship, wanting to have a better life here, but only finding, we, like people of color, immigrants, low-income and workers struggle, even here in the United States. We know that communities of color are the dumping grounds for pollution, and also for unhealthy foods and become food deserts. One of our major campaigns at Ged Green is ensuring that low-income families have access to healthy foods. We found this out through our community-based research, our Women in the Green Economy project, where we asked low-income women of color what was important to them in the environmental work. And since then, since they identified that healthy foods was something that they really saw as important for their health, but also their livelihood, we've been pushing for programs such as the Fresh Bucks program, which is a fresh food dollars that low-income families or people in the food security gap can access to be able to access local fresh produce from local farmers, as well as ethnic grocery stores. During the pandemic, this program was expanded for emergency food vouchers. And we saw, more and more people identify food security as a growing need when dealing with the impacts of climate change. We know as climate change worsens, there are more famines and droughts, and the cost of healthy food becomes more and more increased. Actually, Seattle is known as like the most expensive in groceries nationally. And so we're definitely trying to ensure that no matter what class you're in or what income you have, that you can have healthy foods in your neighborhood. And I'll just add, I know I might be over, but something that we've been learning is that, it's not enough to be consumers of healthy, good foods. We want to also be in solidarity with the people who distribute and grow our food. And so over the years, we've been learning about food sovereignty thanks to our partners at CAGJ and C2C and FUJ, that we've been able to, because we live in this urban centers, we've been so removed from from the food production ourselves. When we ask our members, like, where does food come from, they say the grocery store. And so we've been doing our due diligence to learn where our food comes from and be there to support in solidarity for the workers because it's not healthy if the people who are growing our food are exploited. And so we participated in pickets and boycotts, as well as tried to learn about how to grow our own food, because we know when there's a crisis, that's the first thing that our people need the most of, food security. And so that's something that we are developing as a local campaign on emergency food hubs. How can our communities be more resilient, and advocating that food justice is very much part of climate justice, climate resilience, and ensuring that it's part of the planning that goes into addressing climate change crisis. And happy to talk more, but yeah, food is very important to our people in our community, and it's how we gather and celebrate our various cultures and and build community together. So it's important for us to continue to mobilize around food. And that's all. I'll stop right there. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. And I will pass it to Edgar.
Hello, I'm Edgar, the political director for Independent Farmworker Union, Familias Unidas por la Justicia, based in Burlington, Washington. So with food sovereignty, I think this question, I think it's really an important one, especially from a union that works directly, whose members work directly with the land and under an exploitative capitalist industrial agricultural model. To kind of really analyze the situation we're in right now. Farm workers are some of the poorest people in not only the United States but the whole world when it comes to labor. Because of how bad the food system has been built and kept in place by these huge landowners, robber barons kind of people. So I think for us to have a independent farm worker union in Washington and United States that's led by indigenous people from Mexico, I think it's pretty unique about the union, and I think it also speaks to what's possible if we're trying to build food sovereignty within the United States, and to be in solidarity with the global people's movement to build solid food sovereignty and agroecology. Because it does come with a fight. You have to fight. To use just transition language, you have to fight the bad while you build the good. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, that the struggle for food sovereignty does require, a lot of different tactics. Here in the United States, we used strikes and labor stoppages and boycotts, but also used, a legal strategy so workers could get, some kind of relief on the legal front, something that has been denied for generations for farm workers. But luckily we were able to find good lawyers all to complement the direct actions and the people doing the work on the fields. So I think now being part of the union, really looking at the different ways that we can be useful as a union to really make food sovereignty and worker organizing easier and possible down the line. I think that's been one of our biggest interests for the union, not just to administer the contract and just be stuck in our just focus on administering and taking care of the members, but I think the members really care about what's happening around the world, especially, because they are not from here, they're immigrants. They really see the ties from building international solidarity with peasant people from Mexico and, from the Philippines. We've done stuff to try to support the fights in the Philippines and South Africa and wherever there's peasant farmers, people organizing. Um, so, I think that's an important piece that we like to bring into the food sovereignty fight is the component of organized labor, but also be more, conscious that organized labor is shifting and the food system is shifting. So we really have to be flexible and really integrate a lot of new tactics and thinking about how do we transform the food system. Um, do traditional labor organizing, unionizing, but also, build what's next. Like if we're trying to build, if the economy that we have right now, it's bad and exploitative and extractive, what's the, economy that's good for workers, and workers, I think, know that already. So we're trying to just make space for workers to do that within, organized labor um, analysis or tactics as well. So, integrate some of those things. So yeah, we're trying to, do something here in Washington that could hopefully cause ripple effects throughout the country and throughout the region. Solidarity with workers that are trying to organize. So we were in Yakima. We get calls from like warehouse workers and other immigrant workers.
Sorry to cut you off, but can you finish up your thought?
Yeah. So just to let people know right now, we're in a really good position to organize, but we have to seize that opportunity and be ready for when workers need the help.
Great, thank you so much. Next up, Estefania from UNR.
Yeah, hi everybody. It's so nice to be here. I feel like I feel like spaces and streets with some of the folks here. And I'm part of Uprooted and Rising, and we are a national movement that is looking to galvanize young people, especially the power of students, to turn against their institutions of higher education and end the relationship between big food companies and our education institutions. Part of the strategy there is that we're basically trying to go after the intellectual, and the academic and basically the research that supports the policy that the big food companies essentially go and lobby, and use as like the research, that advances their agenda. And so I'm going to talk about the Black Corporate Salmon campaign as well. And in that case, for example, it's a very clear example where the University of Washington and other Sea Grant universities, essentially, get grants to advance the agenda of the industrial fishing industry, are behind the science of genetically engineered salmon and are behind the science of expanding offshore aquaculture, which is essentially, massive fishing in the ocean. And so these institutions are actually indoctrinating the next generation, with white knowledge, essentially. And so what we do is we're trying to disrupt that. We're trying to disrupt that in higher education, and at the same time, like you said, Edgar, that's kind of like our block, the thing that we're trying to bring down. And the way that we build is that we've also designed our movement to be very reliant on local branches and local community, so that, when folks that are, the organizing can be happening all the time, but at the end of the day, there's a place where organizers can be at home and have support. And so we designed Uprooted and Rising with the learnings that we have from global peasant movements. In designing Uprooted and Rising, we were in communication with our counterpart in Brazil. It's called Levante, that are kind of like the youth wing of the landless workers movement in Brazil. And so the way that we approach things is we also our approach is very people powered. So we're essentially, on like a journey of however many years it takes to just get hundreds of thousands of people on this active in their, actively participating in food sovereignty projects in their communities, and actively trying to disrupt the science and the research and like the purchasing power and all these things that come from these institutions that are really invested in the destruction of our communities and not in the education of our next generation. And so that's our point of like disruption. For me personally, there's a lot of things that have led me to this place. I grew up in Ecuador. I came to the US when I was 18. And those 18 years that I lived in Ecuador really shaped everything, everything from carrying the traumas of the financial crises in my family that were directly, a direct result of US policy in our country. And seeing like people's movements overthrow governments multiple times. And that really shaped my perspective of what's possible. In 2012, I actually I was involved with the effort to pass a new law of agrobiodiversity, seeds, and agroecology in Ecuador. And it was then that year that there were these US scientists that were coming to whisper in our president's ear to basically convince him to take out the protections against GE seeds that we have in our constitution, which is the constitution that was passed by the people in 2006, that had a lot of other protections, including protections to nature. And so, in that moment, I remember I had to learn, I learned everything about genetically engineered everything. And it's, that's one piece that I bring to the work is the understanding what it has meant to protect us against GE in Ecuador and what it would mean to introduce genetically engineered animals to the world economy. And so I also, in 2013, I'm skipping a couple of things here just to make it brief, but in 2013, I got the opportunity to work and organize with small fishermen in New England and fish processing plant workers that were showing two different paradigms and parts of the supply chain of the fishing industry. And this is where I learned a lot about the realities of the fishing industry and how I learned I learned to explain the things that I had seen growing up in Ecuador. Many people, I'm from the highlands, and many people from the highlands go to the coast, once a year or whenever. And it's like a whole trip. It's very, it's a very fond memory that I have of smelling the ocean coming down the Andes, and at night, like welcoming fishermen, like just the lines and lines and lines of small fishermen that come to the shore in the evening, and how that had disappeared over the many years. And it broke my heart that I had to come to the United States to learn why that happened. And so what I learned from Americans, right, is to explain to me, to make me realize that what's happened in my own country is that many of those people that were in the shore are now pushed into processing plants. And that is the food system we live in. And so in UNR, my time is probably up soon, but I am particularly part of UNR Seattle, which is, it's the branch that I am part of, here. And there we actually do mutual aid work pretty deeply. We host a pantry every month where we serve, I don't like the word serve, where we build community amongst ourselves and our team. And also we basically fundraise and buy produce from Black, Indigenous, and farmers of color. And then we organize other grocery donations to complement that, to give to about 200 families, immigrant families every month in Burien. This began with the COVID-19 Mutual Aid Network at the beginning of the pandemic, because immigrant communities, especially undocumented communities, were the first to not, receive benefits from the government. Like we just didn't receive anything, any pandemic relief. And so that felt important. And then later in June of last year, we partnered up.
Sorry, could you wrap it up real quick? Yeah, sorry.
Yes. Yeah, and so we do this food sovereignty work here locally, and we help coordinate the Black Corporate Summit campaign with other branches across the country. And definitely props to CAGJ because we're definitely building on the work that CAGJ and tribes here in the Pacific Northwest have done to expose the issue of GE salmon. So I'll talk about that more later.
Yeah, the GE salmon is very important. Next up, United Food and Commercial Workers, Fabiola or Meg, whoever wants to talk.
Hi, I will start. So hi, my name is Fabiola Lopez and I'm from UFCW 21. I'm a community organizer, and who UFCW fits in, we represent 47,000 members in Washington state in different districts. In local areas like in Skagit and Whatcom County, we represent Draper Valley, Bornstein's, and Klaus Meat. Those are our processing poultry and fish. Klaus Meat actually delivers meat to restaurants. And also we represent grocery workers like PCC, Central Co-op, Red Apple, Hagen's, The Markets, Fred Meyer's, QFC, Albertsons, Safeways, and independent stores like Payless and Freeland, who we're currently bargaining their contract. And we have worked at Draper Valley by adding language in our contracts that our stewards can go and actually monitor the speed of the line, and they're able to go talk to the manager. It's an ongoing issue, and it's something we continuously have to train people to make sure they speak up on. We also at Bornstein's, we represent, our representative is she's bilingual, and she works with a vulnerable population by letting them know their rights and actually getting information that they need. During COVID, she helped a lot in helping them figure out insurance, how the employer would pay them, and right before we figured unemployment insurance for them. So there was a lot of work that went in to help our members at Bornstein's. And within the co-op, we have been able to take the model from Central Co-op and brought it through our PCC to have some board members, some workers be represented on the board. And Meg, who is a great leader from Central Co-op, will be talking a little bit more about that. Meg, do you want to bring it on?
Sure. Thanks, Fabiola. So hi, everybody. For those that don't know me, I'm Meg Kennedy. I have been working for food sovereignty, food justice, farm worker rights with the UFCW. And in addition to, I'm a member of the UFCW, obviously through my job at Central Co-op. And my position at Central Co-op had a lot to do with the sustainability of our communities and of food. I've done a lot of work around genetically modified, as we just heard about. But I'm here to represent UFCW, and some of the great things that UFCW has done and is currently doing is I'm imagining most of you have heard of hazard pay. And that was a huge fight that UFCW took on and talked to employers and tried to get them to give all of us workers hazard pay during the pandemic. They were met with lots of resistance and decided to take it to the legislature. And some of you may have heard that the city of Seattle passed hazard pay for all grocery store workers. There were some stipulations around that. And one of them was that you had to have 500 employees or more, and that would make you eligible for this hazard pay. Central Co-op was not one of them. We only have about 150 employees, but the UFCW came in and helped us as workers negotiate with our management to get us hazard pay. And so that was fantastic, even though we weren't a part, we weren't technically, they weren't forced to give it to us. It was the work of the UFCW and us UFCW members that helped our management realize that the work we're doing, no matter how many of us, is the same as the folks that were under that bill from the city council. As Fabiola mentioned, UFCW also we have some folks at Central Co-op on workers on the board of directors, which helps give a voice to the workers on a board. And they use that sort of model to help and encourage the folks that wanted to run at PCC to do what they had to do to run. And in case you don't know, there are now two PCC workers on the board of directors at PCC, which is really huge. The workers haven't felt like they've had a voice in a long time, I think, with the exception of being in the union. So I think that's fantastic. It's a great victory, and UFCW was behind that very much so. Other things that UFCW has done and is sort of some of it's ongoing. I mean, when we years and years ago with the Driscoll's Akuma Brothers boycott, UFCW was there on the ground with folks. They helped organize a lot. They helped organize at the different stores to help push the boycott, which was really important and really did well. And let's see, some other things that I think are joyful that the UFCW has done or helped bring joy. One of my favorite personal ones is that during all the Black Lives Matter protests, we really saw, you know, what police are capable of. Not that we didn't know before that, but and our UFCW, as part of the Washington State Labor Council, went to the Police Guild, which is a police union, and basically said, hey, you need to, we have a bunch of basically demands for you if you want to stay a part of the Washington State Labor Council. And it was all about their treatment, their different tactics that the police use. And the Police Guild refused to agree. And so now they are no longer in the Washington State Labor Council. And so they don't get the protections that that council would have given them. So that made me personally really proud of my union and the union here in Washington State to be able to do that and tell another union, if you don't learn how to treat people, we're not going to support you. So that's really exciting for me. And I was really proud to hear that work. Also, UFCW has created a solidarity fund. It supports grants for the Washington State Labor Council project, and it's called a Labor of Love. And it's money for BIPOC folks, for labor workers, for school, etc. Also, something I was directly involved in, I did some time working at the union for a few months, a few summers ago, and we created something called the Movement Builders. It's a group of rank and file workers throughout the whole spectrum of UFCW folks. So food chain, medical, everything in between, that deals with things that aren't in our union contracts. And so one of the things that we're doing currently is creating monthly donations in Kitsap County. It's called Feeding Our Neighbors, and it provides food for houseless folks there. Yeah.
Sorry, just for time's sake, could you wrap it up?
I was going to say, I think that's it. But yeah, I'm very proud to be part of UFCW and part of this whole group. And a lot of you on this call are my local favorite heroes. So thank you for having us.
Thank you. Sorry, I keep cutting people off, but we have another question to get to after this. And last but not least, I will pass it to Liz from Community to Community.
Hey everyone, I'm Liz Darrow. I'm the Legislative Advocate and Media Coordinator at C2C. I am sitting in tonight for Rosalinda, who had a family emergency last minute, couldn't make it. So thank you for having me here in this space. For those who are unfamiliar, C2C is in our 16th year of organizing for farm worker justice and immigrant rights. And so we've organized in solidarity with FUJ, and also have worked with Tierra y Libertad, which is the first worker-owned cooperative farm in Whatcom County. And we have a vision toward creating and supporting more cooperatives and working toward sort of workers owning their own land and being self-determined in that way. But at the same time, like Edgar mentioned, supporting union organizing in the workplace. So it's sort of both of those things. The eventual vision would be no bosses. And part of that work in the last year and a half, of course, the pandemic shifted everything. But for us, that meant the promotoras that we work with have expanded a lot. There's a new CAGJ center. We have 16 promotoras in Whatcom and Skagit County. And I think depending on where you live, the word promotora has sort of shifted toward a lot of people thinking that that means like health center workers. But in our work, the promotoras are, they work with farm workers and community, but also they do a lot of formación and support workers in all kinds of ways. So it isn't just health. Through the pandemic, it has been creating this center so that people have a place to go to learn about what their risks are and see if we can help get some PPE out to the fields. And then that moved into sort of some vaccination coordination. So it really is just the 16 promotoras who are doing the work are from the communities.
Can you just say that word one more time for the interpreter? The prima.
Oh,
sorry,
excuse me, here, I'll put it in the chat. Promotora, like that. And so there are folks who come from the communities that they work with. So there are some Indigenous women, farm worker women. C2C is women-led, but we do have one young man who is a promotora as well. So that work has been really big too, in terms of organizing workers and community in the direction that they actually need, rather than, you know, charity work or and so that's where the distinction with the word promotora is important, because it isn't giving to, it's working with and lifting up. And so that's why it's really important that the promotoras in the centers are also part of that community. So there's multilingual capability there as well. Other things that we have been working on: organizing voters when we can, registered voters. A lot of the people that C2C works with are undocumented farm workers. And so in that way, we are working toward immigration rights as well. We have 3 people who we work with, myself being one of them, who sit on the Immigration Advisory Board, which is new in Whatcom County, just finished a year of meeting. And that process really is about giving governance back to the people, which has been tough because we've been meeting on Zoom the entire year. But the vision and the hope is that we can decouple governing process from hierarchical white supremacist structures. So sort of dismantling the rules that have always governed these, especially in smaller spaces, and looking more toward like a participatory democracy model, which C2C has always been that has always been the organizing model, and the pandemic has made that hard. And so we're looking forward to getting back to organizing with people in person, because it's a difficult thing to do for a lot of reasons from behind a computer screen. So I guess I'll just wrap up with saying that from a national perspective, immigration reform is really a big issue right now, and there are 4 major bills being considered, none of which C2C supports in a nutshell, because parsing out immigrants is not what needs to happen. We support an amnesty for all approach, but if there are people who are motivated to write letters and make phone calls, the Farm Workforce Modernization Act is bad for farm workers and immigrants, and we stand really strongly against it, and we have since it emerged in 2018. It's a punitive immigration bill that supports industry, and it punishes farm workers and their families. And so we've been working with the Food Chain Workers Alliance to get that word out, because a lot of people haven't really dug in to understand why it's bad, and just think that, you know, citizenship for anybody is a good thing. But it's similar to the blue card system, where it's just it's really difficult to navigate, and it ends up being just really expanding the H-2A guest worker program, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar, is really like a slave labor program. And so that's one of our priorities this year. We don't have a timeline, it's already passed the House. And so we're really trying to get people to contact your senators, be really public about it. You'll see a lot of unions and organizations who are normally more in line with the issues we're talking about here with food sovereignty, who have signed on to it. And so it's really important to look into that. And people, oh yeah, thank you for that link, Mary, in the chat. Please feel free to reach out. Edgar also knows a ton about this and has been doing a lot of meetings about it. So it's important that people understand that what we're hearing from farm worker communities in Whatcom and Skagit County is that they don't want expansion of H-2A. They don't want a difficult pathway to citizenship. So we need to scrap what's on the table right now and look at amnesty for everybody.
Great, thank you so much. And for the second question, I will pass it to Sam.
Hi everyone, my name is Sam Schaeffer. My pronouns are she, her. And yeah, I have the honor of asking you all another question. So for summer school right now, our theme is about centering joy and cultivating care. But what we really want to be clear and honest and candid about is that we don't organize just because it's a fun thing to do. It's out of necessity. And at the root, your work, each of you, affirms that people across the food chain deserve to do more than just survive, but to thrive. And so collectively, our organizing aims to transform suffering and the oppressive systems that cause harm. How does your organizing and your organization and the coalitions you're a part of build joy, care, and culture into the fabric of the change work you are doing? And where does this show up in the present as well as in your vision of the future?
Sure.
And we'll
Right.
start with Jill from Ged Green, and we'll go in the same order.
Yeah. So a lot of what Ged Green does is place making. We're very much a local organization. You know, for example, like people reach out to us like, will you come and organize in North Seattle, or will you come organize in Snohomish? And we're like, no, because we are really rooted in South Seattle and Beacon Hill, and you know, that's where our people are at. Even though some people have been displaced and pushed out of the city, what we're doing is creating a place where they can return to, and we want to make it so that, you know, people who have ties to the area have, again, a political home, a community home, and that's kind of in the same line as our you know, like what we want to build around resilience hubs is in times of need or times of celebration. Where do you go? Where, you know, you don't go to a place you don't know, or people, you know, you don't know. And what we've learned around the world is whenever there is crisis or like a disaster, it's the frontline people who come to you first are your neighbors, your community members. Those are the folks you want to see, who actually show up first, not FEMA, not, you definitely don't want to see the military, the police show up at your door, right? You want to see people from the community. And so a lot of our activities and our actions is to instill that, you know, that we're practicing. How do we build communities? How do we solve problems not by ourselves? How do we not buy into this individualist US culture where you have to pull yourselves up by the bootstraps, right? But to really lean on your neighbors, really lean on your the people in your circles. And even if you are no longer living in the area, that you still have a place to go. Like, you know, people work here, go to school here, grew up here. And yeah, you find folks, and when the office was open, people would come hang out at the office because they knew the people here. And so that's something we want to become, is an emergency hub. We want to see many more communities, groups and places be able to, yeah, have the resources and the training. Like we're most adept to take care of our communities than, again, like people who have these degrees, like, because we know our people, we speak their language, we have the culture, you know, and we're not gonna, like, uh, attack them or put them in jail. You know, like those are things that we're against. We don't want to create a dangerous situation. I think about all of the militaristic responses to the pandemic around the world, or even what we witnessed with the uprisings, how the police responded with violence. Something that we were doing last year, especially as people were participating, is doing know your rights trainings and supporting people through working through that trauma, having healing circles, processing, but also teaching them, how, their rights and how to, you know, mobilize, because we're a powerful community when we mobilize together. And yeah, also welcome children always. We want our families to be coming, come as they are, and you know, we provide childcare and ensure there's healthy food at all our activities, so people don't have to choose between coming, you know, between their families or their work, or you know, or coming out. We want to make sure that we're open and people can come to us when they need us. That's all.
Beautifully and succinctly said. Thank you, Jill. And Edgar, what would you like to add?
I would think that like, I think well, at least for me, my definition of joy is a little bit different. I mean, for the last couple of months, it's been a lot of it's been difficult, you know, having those personal connections. I know before we would try to have as many meetings we could with the membership and the families from the union, and, you know, having carne asadas and, you know, having activities where we all got together to plan out about what we wanted to do as on behalf of the union. So, you know, I think because of the pandemic and just how hard life has been for farm workers, trying to find joy within that whole time, it's been a little difficult. However, we were able to support, thousands of workers in Yakima that went out on strike fighting for their lives. And I think that was, for us, brought us joy because, people were fighting back. And they had so much trust and respect for Familias Unidas and the organizing we had been doing, that they called us. We're from the other side of the state, but yet they called us to go and support them. So that was really, it's interesting to see. I think also passing the overtime law really brought us joy. Changing a historical wrong, a law that had been existed in the books for like 80 years. We were able to overturn it here and give overtime for farm workers for the first time in Washington state, and that's not only benefits just, our union members, which is like 500 people, but it's like 100,000 workers all over Washington state. And now it's setting kind of like a wave. Like there's other states that are fighting for overtime, and looking at the historical racist laws that have been put in place to keep people down. And and I think it's important to acknowledge that, it wasn't happening in a vacuum, because at the same time these conversations were happening, it was the fight, the rebellions that were happening all over the United States. And just so happened that there was also a farm worker movement and organizing campaign that was happening at the same time. But it created an environment where people were willing more to take risks and take on a system, and looking at the system and taking it on and changing it. And I think these are just like little moments of joy that we've been finding for this last couple of years. But we know, right immediately after the overtime bill passed, the growers already started moving into the direction of how to dismantle the overtime bill. So we don't have much time to really enjoy it, because we go right back into organizing and pushing for more to make sure the growers don't take away something that we fought hard for. But yeah, I think also, just to kind of wrap it up, creating art has been really nice also, and joyful. You can see this banner behind me. This was done during a art build a couple years ago. The workers, there's a lot of musicians and photographers and singers and poets within the union. So it's been good seeing them do that, artisans. So also that, highlighting that has been really nice to see. A lot of the young people also participating and growing. So yeah, I think that's within this last couple of years, I think that's been what's been really nice to see, and that brings joy.
Thank you, Edgar. Estefania from UNR, how do you build joy now, and what does that look like in your visions for the future?
Yeah, I guess I just realized, I remembered just now that we actually have a principle within UNR that says we fill our movement with joy. And I think the point of that principle was that because I think, we shifted or we learned from like the energy of running campaigns where you spend like a lot of time, thinking about how to convince your opposition to change their minds or hearts. And so now what we do is we actually decenter that completely and center our joy in our bodies. And I think in UNR, I feel like there's a lot of survivors. There's a lot of people that have found a home in this because of their experiences, out there in the world for a lot of different reasons. And so one of the things that, I would agree, I think it was really this year has been extremely hard for me personally and for the people around me. And I think it was extremely uplifting to see how in the, in the salmon campaign, I feel like it's been really incredible to like for everybody that's a part of it to find a piece of their story, in that, to find the interconnectedness, in as like a global community, and see the possibility of solidarity between Indigenous people and fisher folk all over the world. And today, I was excited about the topic about workers because we've just begun to call on chefs essentially to boycott GE salmon. So the level of solidarity does something to my heart that is really real. And then in the work that we do for mutual aid here in Burien, by galvanizing the resources from Seattle, that has been a special space. I actually don't even know how I would have made it, through the pandemic without that. We started to organize these pantries in June, like I said it, in partnership with COVID-19 Mutual Aid, South King County Mutual Aid, and here and there with the Trans Women of Color Solidarity Network and Queer the Land. And in that, I think that our role is critical relationships, and deeply, like, our mutual aid doesn't extend to the service of the pantry, but it actually has extended a lot to each other. I wouldn't have been able to survive without like the emotional support that I received from this group. There's many times where people haven't been able to make ends meet, or not be able to pay rent, or for we fundraise for people's like to pay for school. So there's all these different ways in which we've shown up for each other that has felt just because we've remained really consistent with that. We run a pantry every month, and we're pretty committed to continuing to do that. That consistency has really provided, a lot of grounding for a lot of visioning and a lot of relationship. And so I stopped there because of the time, but that, those two things I think are just held up by, I guess mutual aid and like international solidarity, I think, are the two themes, I think, of how we center joy and center survivors in many ways, in the ways that we do things, whether it is the pace in which we do things, like the patience, that we need in order to like let ourselves catch up to our own bodies. And in the salmon campaign, I think, it's been an honor to like act on the responsibility that we have as settlers on the land, to be accountable to the First Nations here. And if we are saying that we're fighting for food sovereignty, then if fighting for the salmon, and in our case, like the Black Corporate Salmon Campaign is just a sliver of like the ocean and world, of Native-led initiatives to protect the salmon. And so we are just coordinating a block campaign. And that has given us so much, just from being tied to this issue and learning from everybody that has really fought for it until now.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And just to sort of draw some connections between what you all have said before we move on to Fabiola and Meg, I'm just hearing that relationship and community and that the collective power and like exhale that can come from righting historical wrongs and building resilience together and making art are some themes that are coming up in what you all are saying of where the joy in your movements comes from. And it's really powerful to hear each of you talk about how that comes up and how it feels like joy, but how it also feels like all these other things, especially when that joy and the lightheartedness of joy is hard to come by, but like the satisfaction or the connection or that feeling of being supported when everything else is really hard is where that futuring comes into the present for you all so far. I hope I'm summarizing that correctly. That's what's appearing for me. And now I'd like to go to Fabiola and Meg from UFCW. Where does joy fit into your movements?
Well, thanks, Sam. So joy, it's very interesting. We, as UFCW, we just lost a great leader Dave Schmidt passed away, one of our longtime presidents. And he brought lots of vision. And one of the reasons I'm here today is because him and Diane took initiative of hiring people of color to be able to represent the members that we represent as UFCW 21. So that brings me joy as every day, because as bringing people of color within the organization, and then us being able to go and look out into our work sites and being able to bring those strong BIPOC community into different movements, that has been a great way of bringing joy and building up leaders within our workplace. Like I mentioned earlier, Christina, who is bilingual and represents Draper and Bornstein, is able to look at the leaders, be able to have those conversations in their native language and bring them up and uplift them. And that brings lots of joy in every day. And knowing that even us as a union that we've been in place for a long time, there has been changes, and I've been here almost 9 years, and I've seen the dramatic change that the local has gone through. So that is an amazing joy, I think, that brings to me. Being able to lead with members' voices. We have Meg here today that has been at a Central Co-op for 20 plus years, and being able to be a strong leader within her union, that it's a lot of joy. Being able to participate in different community events, May Day, Juneteenth, Pride, Refuse to Abuse, that is coming up in July 17th. So I will send you guys a link. That's a great organization to help support domestic violence and how to end domestic violence. So I will put in a link, and hopefully you guys could join me. I will be doing a virtual one in Mount Vernon. Well, Kristen and I will be running out of Seattle, and then I'm going to try to run and do an event here in Mount Vernon. So if you guys have time on July 17th, that would be great. We've also been able to provide citizenship day within the local. We were able to get one member at least from Draper to become a citizen and get her through that process. And we're going and working on that process and helping members there. One other thing that brings joy right now is we have a movement builders in down south that we're trying to introduce up north, that is centered in a shared meal as part of bringing diverse members and organized around issues in the workplace and communities. So that's something that we're looking forward. And Meg already talked about the Police Guild and how we said that they're just not walking an MLK-CLC. So that's a lot of part of that joy. And one last thing, I know we're running behind in time, but when FUG started organizing, my parents are entrepreneurs, and so they sell food in different carts. So they were there when everybody was going out on strike, and so my parents were calling me, "Hey, everybody's going out," and I was like, "What's going on?" So it was, it's awesome just to watch when it started and how things happened, and now where FUG and C2C is. So great work, everybody. So I'm done.
So just real quick, everything Fabiola said absolutely brings joy and is one of the reasons I'm proud to be part of the UFCW. You know, and just really quickly, like the support that the UFCW has done for all of us members brings joy. I mean, hazard pay for the food workers and other folks, that definitely brings joy to my paycheck and to my life. And just the solidarity that the UFCW brings together is also really joyful. And like Fabiola mentioned, all of the events that the UFCW takes a part of, being, you know, in groups with my co-UFCW folks also brings folks a lot of joy. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, both of you. And Liz, will you finish this off for us?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Real quick, there was a question in the chat about how come the overtime bill passed, do you think? And I wanted to say, like, something that brought me so much joy this year was just seeing that win, because it started out as an industry written racist, terrible bill. And the leadership from FUJ fought so hard. And on top of that, just seeing the level of commitment that you know, the base that they've built up over time, people really trust that leadership at C2C and FUJ. And we did have some really strong allies actually in the legislature, which doesn't always happen, but Lillian Self-Ortiz was amazing. Mike Sells was pretty good. So, but seeing that, watching the people in power step back for a minute and really get curious about what would work, and then allowing the leadership at FUJ to lay it out. That was awesome. That was a huge win, and that brought a lot of joy. And then also, I think, and other people have said this too in different ways, but like the trust that my team has in me brings me a lot of joy, because I think, you know, growing up in a culture of individualism where you know, everything has to be owed and paid and transactional. And it's really not like that at all at C2C. It's more accountability to each other. And that is something that is just over time, we learn to trust each other. And there's a ton of joy in that. And then also getting back to eating food together, enjoying music together, passing babies around. Like I just miss so much that food and music is such a huge part of food sovereignty work, and sharing families together, you know, and having kids running around. So we're getting back to that, and that is hugely joyful. And then the center in Skagit is beautiful. It's amazing. And they're doing a lot of just opening up to the community in a way that hasn't been possible. In Bellingham, our center is like on the 4th floor, and it's really hot and it's not accessible. So seeing like the promotoras running this space that community can come and enjoy music and support each other and stuff has been really super cool.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Liz, and thank you to all of our panelists. There are so many more questions we have for you. And there's so much more that each of you could say. So we'll just have to do this again sometime very soon, maybe in person next time. Who knows? But there's definitely just so much more wisdom that each of you can offer us and offer your movements. And I'm so glad that each of you is in leadership where you are. It's really awesome. And now I'm going to pass it off to, I'm not sure who, to close us off. I think back to Connor.
Oh, could I add something if we're not going to do the other questions real quick?
Oh yeah, please. Any closing remarks or thoughts?
Yeah,
we have 5 minutes for that.
Okay, please. Yeah, Estefania.
Okay. Well, yeah, another day I would love to break down the labor issues on G7, because I realized I'm probably not going to have time to do that. But I wanted to share a detail that just recently, this last pantry that we had on Sunday, there was a really sweet moment because Ramon from Tierra y Libertad, the cooperative, came down to the pantry because he was delivering a bunch of berries that we bought for this pantry from them. And that was such a powerful moment, because not only that, in this last pantry 2 weeks ago, I don't know if folks followed here, the occupation at Casa Latina, where survivors were demanding that the 2 top leaders are taken down and won. It was an incredible struggle, and I was lucky to be there in the occupation at times and support, really get to know the survivors and the folks that were organizing. And they joined our pantry team. And so on Sunday, Ramon met the survivors from the organizing in Casa Latina. And it was a beautiful moment to see that two folks that represent like folks that really took down the powers that be with their organizing. That was incredibly grassroots. And so that was like a beautiful experience that we had at the pantry this weekend that I wanted to share, since Edgar is here.
Thank you for that addition. And yeah, so our panelists, we sent you a couple other questions. And unfortunately, we don't have time to really get into them. But if there's anything that those additional questions about partnership and solidarity with other organizations, and I can't remember what the other question was, but if there was anything else you wanted to add, we have until about 8:13, so about 5 more minutes for things that you wish you had a chance to say that we need to hear from you. Don't be shy, jump in.
I also just want to invite Kristen, if you want to share, like the idea for this event actually came from a conversation with Kristen Bifus where we were talking about how there's a National Food Chain Workers Alliance, and Kristen's been agitating, organizing with some of you all to organize a Food Chain Workers Alliance in Washington State. So I don't know if you want to say more about that idea for a future event potentially.
Just to say how much we appreciate Community Alliance for Global Justice for pulling this all together, and to say that Familias Unidas por la Justicia and Community to Community have been part of the National Food Chain Workers Alliance. And it's just something that we would be really open to. And I know we've been talking with Rosalinda and Edgar and Ramon and Fabiola. And as we're bringing together our members across food processing and food retailing, and then our brothers and sisters with the Teamsters who are involved in transportation and storage. You might have heard Teamsters just recently went on strike in a food storage facility in Skagit, that we see, as we've been hearing tonight, so many opportunities to support each other in the struggle and collectively raise up struggles along the food supply chain here, but then also globally. So just to say, we're very excited to participate, and we know it starts with bringing together workers along the food supply chain, as Fabiola said, to share a meal, to be talking about what's happening, and to start organizing, because that's where at the core of all of our work. So much appreciation for this, adding fuel to that fire.
I would love to share, I think maybe writing off of that, but one thing I was getting ready to share is kind of to break down the labor issues in the fishing industry, and then how that ties in with where the direction of GE Salmon and what this company, Aqua Bounty, is trying to do. And a lot of the automation and all of that is included in that, which further like basically takes out incentives for labor protections in an industry that's already almost very deadly and very dangerous. But essentially, Aqua Bounty is trying to get this salmon into restaurants, into kitchens, through food service, and essentially in these insidious ways where you can't see the labeling, in order to normalize it, you know. And like in 10 years from now, they'll be like, "What are you talking about? You were already eating GE salmon, right?" And so the call to action is that right now we're calling on chefs to commit to boycotting GE salmon, as in like, don't cook with it, don't touch it, reject it. But I think in preparation for this, and in talking to Yasmin, who actually has a direct more personal connection with the Thai industry, that is very, that has resulted in a lot of violence for the people that work in the boats in Thailand specifically, but also this large corporation called Thai Union Group that perpetuates slavery, child labor, and many other things in the fishing industry. And essentially seeing the supply chain as the place where we can reject this. You know, the tribes have sued the FDA. They won. That lawsuit is holding back other GE fish. So that, you know, that's like an incredible line of defense there that the tribes did for us all. And now this company is essentially is being allowed to do whatever it wants. And so it's trying to release its GE salmon regardless, even though there's this lawsuit there. And so we're relying on workers, chefs, cooks, everyone that works in distribution, anybody that works, you know, in any part of the supply chain to enforce Indigenous sovereignty. I think this is an opportunity, you know, for workers to show up for Indigenous people and in being solidarity in this way, by literally just not touching it and rejecting it completely. And so, you know, I'd be curious to follow up. And I think unions should really get behind this.
Thank you so much. And if each of our panelists wants to drop in the chat a link to where people can find more information about your current campaigns and what calls to action you have right now, that would be awesome, just to have those there for everyone. But we'll also have those in our notes and can send them in some follow-up resources. Thank you all so much. Any other final thoughts before we close out and say goodbye?
I just have a quick announcement, but do any of our speakers want to go ahead, Edgar?
No, I was just gonna say that the union wouldn't have been here without CAGJ, Estefania, Jill, C2C, the whole team. So there was a lot, Fabiola, and I remember Fabiola and Christina showing up to the picket lines and the strikes. So, and Kristen, so it was and we win, like it was because of everybody that really showed up and threw down for almost 4 years. So we're always, and still being here with us and building TUJ and everything. So we're always thankful for that.
Yeah, I second that too. Like this is a movement, like I've been in the streets with all of you in the picket lines and the boycotts, whether it's Bellingham, Skagit, Mount Vernon, or it's in Seattle or even Tacoma. Like we've been, even in San Francisco, we were, out there together. And I think that, because we understand that we're trying to, it's not just our, our neighborhoods, like the historically people think just about, like NIMBY, right? NIMBYians is not in my neighborhood, but really we're trying to build solidarity. And yeah, I think that whenever, there's attack on one community, all of us are have to come together and really want to extend that as well. The environmental justice movement isn't just about protecting the trees and something far away, but it's here in our communities and it's each other. So I'm just really grateful to be in this movement with y'all.
Thank you so much, everyone. One of the places where folks have shown up with us over the years is contesting the power of Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation. And we have a big opportunity for that coming up because our summer school is kind of leading up to the United Nations Food Systems Summit, which had the potential to be a great gathering space, but has turned out to really be completely controlled by the Gates Foundation and agribusiness corporations trying to consolidate their power. So there's a call for actions protesting the pre-summit, which is coming up in July. And so our campaign focus on the Gates Foundation is organizing a fun theater action at the Gates Foundation headquarters on Friday, July 16th. And we need a bunch of folks to show up. There'll be a collective participatory theater piece showing what we're against and what food sovereignty is about symbolically, and literally disarming Bill Gates. So it's going to be a great piece. Would love for you to participate. We'll send you information about it. And there'll be an art build as well the Wednesday before. So we'll send that out, some more details about that. But we'd love for like our Solidarity Campaign partners to actually be part of the action as well, just to represent all the great work that you're doing. So thank you again. Thank you to the organizing collective for all of your great work putting this together tonight and for emceeing and just for everyone showing up on what is a really hot, uncomfortable night here without AC. I'm sure it is for some of you as well. And we'll all jump off and enjoy the rest of your evening and we'll be in touch. Thank you so much, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.